If you want your ex back, you're probably thinking about giving them a call. But even if you have a good plan and you know exactly what you want to say to your ex on the phone, calling your ex is almost always a bad idea. Now, before I explain why calling is almost always unwise, hello, I'm Brad Browning, a best-selling author of the X Factor program and YouTube's #1 trusted breakup coach for over a decade now. So I've always said that calling your ex is a mistake, but I really wanted to make a video for my clients and for you guys here on YouTube to really hammer home the reasons why this doesn't work and what you should be doing instead. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to any rule, so at the end of the video, I will include some scenarios where you can and even should call your ex and how to handle it when you do. But first off, let's get into it why it's a bad idea to call your ex. Reason number one, they might not answer. And this is actually the #1 reason why I tell people not to call their exes when they're trying to reconnect. Every breakup comes with bad feelings. Even if you and your ex had the most amicable breakup in the history of breakups, it's still a traumatic event for the both of you. It's unlikely, especially so soon after the breakup, that they're going to be ready to commit to a phone conversation. So even if you and your ex have no ill will towards one another and you remain on very good terms, they still might not answer the phone if you call them. They're maybe afraid to talk to you, afraid to reopen those old wounds, or risk an argument, or risk being talked into getting back together. And frankly, I don't blame them. And another factor here is that people just don't talk on the phone the way they used to. A study found that 75% of millennials avoid most phone calls. So if your ex is already in that group and they already have mixed feelings about you, chances are pretty good they're not going to answer. And please don't try calling them from an unknown number either, because another study found that 90% of people don't answer calls from unknown numbers. And if your ex does ignore your call, which is, as we've just discussed, quite likely, then this can be a big problem. Not only because it means that they might not want to talk to you, you might have succeeded using another method of contact, but because it leaves you with less options moving forward. Because really the only thing worse than calling your ex is calling them twice. It looks desperate, and if you don't stop there, it can start to look scary. So really, what do you do if they don't answer? If you can't just call them again later without looking even more desperate and needy? Even following up with a text or waiting a week between attempts is still often pretty risky and could irritate your ex or make them think that you're even clingier and more pathetic than they did before. So if you do call and they don't answer, you're really putting yourself in a tough spot, and it's going to take quite a bit of time and space from your ex before you can actually safely try again. And the second reason is they don't know why you're calling. So if you call your ex out of the blue, you're as likely to scare them as you are to excite them. And this is, frankly, because people fear the unknown. They don't know why you're reaching out to them, and so it's going to make their mind run wild. Do you want them back? Are you angry at them? Are you pregnant? Are you asking for money? Really, a phone call just causes the other person to make assumptions, and since, as we've talked about, your ex, may have negative feelings towards you after the breakup, they could go straight to the worst case scenario. Whereas, texting or other forms of messaging allow you to provide information to the other person so they're not going in blind. They don't have that fear of the unknown like they would if they see a call pop up from you on their phone. And the third reason, it makes it more difficult for you to control the conversation. See, the thing about a phone call is really anything can happen. You don't know what your ex is going to say, so you have to react in the moment. And obviously, this is totally fine when you're talking to a friend or family member. You know what to expect and basically how the conversation will go when you pick up the phone. But with an ex, you often have no idea how to react. The more time has passed since your breakup, the more they can surprise you, and that's probably going to be an issue. And at the same time, if they catch you off guard with a comment or a question, you can easily say something you regret that's going to be really hard to come back from. But remember, getting your ex back is a very delicate process. And you want to eliminate as many variables as possible from this equation so that nothing can go wrong. And calling them out of the blue, it creates a lot of uncertainty, which you really can't control. If things don't go your way, the conversation could be terrible. And at this stage, even one bad conversation can really ruin your chances. The fourth reason is because phone calls make it harder to connect. Unless you've had a lot of conversations with your ex on the phone, this phone call, it could end up being quite awkward. The good thing about a face-to-face meetup is it allows you to use body language, facial expressions, and gestures to actually communicate better. Now this might seem trivial, but it's actually huge. There's actually been a ton of studies on nonverbal communication, and the findings show that 70 to 93% of all communication is actually nonverbal. And so without that at your disposal, talking to your ex is going to be an uphill battle. There's a good chance that your ex will come out of the conversation thinking, it was nice to talk to them, but it just feels like we don't have that spark anymore. And in reality, what's often missing is the nonverbal communication to fill in the gaps and make that connection. Reason number 5 is that it puts pressure on your ex. And this is a big one. Calling an ex is really asking a lot of them. They have to answer the phone, they have to make the time, they have to put on a show for you essentially. They probably have a busy life and they might not have the time or the energy for this. So if they don't answer or they're not in the mood to have the conversation that you're looking for, it can obviously be hurtful. And it can also make them resent you for just taking up their time. Additionally, reason number 6 is that it might lead to a serious conversation. Now, if you haven't watched many of my past videos, you probably wonder, what's wrong with having a deep conversation with your ex? Or what's wrong with talking over, what went wrong in your past relationship and taking time to apologize or share your regrets? Well, the truth is that you need to avoid serious conversations like this, especially early in the process of reconnecting. If you want someone back, it's all about connecting with them emotionally at first. It's about rebuilding real organic attraction. You want to charm them, flirt with them, and show them that you could still make them happy first and foremost. You don't want to rehash old issues and remind them of the reasons for the breakup. And while it is possible for a deep conversation like this to give you some perspective on the breakup, though that is rare, it's still not going to get you any closer to getting them back. It's actually probably going to push you two further apart because they'll start to associate your contact with heavy conversations like this one. So by calling your ex, really, you're practically asking for something like this to happen, and I promise you it's not going to give you the results you want. And reason number 7 is because, frankly, there's better options. So maybe you're wondering, if you shouldn't call your ex, what can you do instead? Well, I always recommend texting your ex when you do want to reconnect after no contact. Texting really is the preferred form of contact these days. And of course, by texting, I mean, any kind of messaging, whether it's WhatsApp, Telegram, SMS, whatever. Essentially, texting allows you to set expectations when you do contact your ex. They'll know why you contacted them and what they should say in return if a reply is needed at all. And remember that even with texting, you should always know exactly what you want to say to your ex and communicate clearly and concisely. Don't just say, hey, don't ask them a boring question. Actually be strategic about it. I always recommend reaching out for a specific reason, even if it's not the real reason you want to talk to them. For example, ask them the name of a restaurant you went to back when you were dating, ask them the brand of paint you used when you were painting the bedroom, this kind of thing. This is going to provide them with a simple response, and it's going to evoke a specific memory for them. Just a few words will transport them, back to a time when you two were in love and actually happy together. And this is also a great way to test the waters and sort of dip your ex back into the conversation. Now, I made a past video that lists off a number of really good texts to send your ex, including a bunch of example messages. Click up here to watch that video next, or at the link in the description below when this video is over. All right, now let's move on and talk about a few specific situations when it comes to calling your ex. Now, I've already said that you shouldn't call them with an unknown number, but you may be thinking about, maybe calling them from somebody else's phone. That is an even worse idea. I mean, I know you're desperate, but what do you plan to do when they pick up? You think you're going to change their mind after you trick them? Come on. But okay, what about if there's an actual emergency happening? Say you got locked out of your shared apartment and there's a fire. In situations like this, obviously calling your ex is acceptable. You don't want someone to get hurt because you're worried about blowing her chances. Your ex is going to understand this, and they're definitely not going to hold it against you. But just make sure that it's an actual emergency. I've had so many clients tell me that they had to call their ex because it was life or death, only to later admit that the emergency was that they lost their favorite hat or something. So please don't fool yourself here. And another question I get asked about is video calls, FaceTime. And while these do have one advantage, you can see each other's faces, this is definitely outweighed by the obvious disadvantage, which is that people are even less likely to answer a FaceTime than they are a regular phone call. The one exception is if you're trying to get your ex back and they live very far away. If you've been talking for a while and you want to see each other, but you can't do it in person, then FaceTime voice calls is probably your best bet. And then there's voicemail. So I think if you call your ex and you get sent to the machine, you need to be very careful about what kind of message you leave. And have a plan for this if you do decide to call them, which again, I do advise against. And now, what should you do if you've already called them and they didn't answer? Now, that kind of scenario is not always a death sentence, but it is probably going to hurt your chances. The best thing you can do is don't freak out. This does happen all the time, so just pretend like it never happened and wait at least a week before you try reaching out again, preferably even longer. And the next time, just send them a text. All right, and that brings us to the end of this video. If you want my personal ongoing help to ensure that you get the very best possible chance of winning back your ex before it's too late, please go to breakupbrad.com/coaching and sign up today if I have any spots available. I would love to work with you. And if you have any questions or thoughts about calling your ex, leave them in the comments down below. And of course, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end, and best of luck.